I was born in a small town in Ohio on July 9, 1850. I grew up in a well-to-do household with my parents Henry and Eliza Worthington. My father inherited a cotton textile factory and my mother came from a wealthy family. I had an older sister of 2 years, Margaret. I grew up a sickly child and was a constant disappointment to my father. My sister was the apple of my father's eye. He doted on her. My mother was, in turn, more devoted to me. My sister and I got along fairly well in my earlier years, and we continue to have a wonderful relationship to this day, but I digress. My father was called to be an officer in the Army of the Potomac in our country's Civil War. He died on the battlefield of Bull Run in 1861. My mother, after grieving, sold the factory and we moved back to her family's estates in New York State. It was during the year of 1862 that my story starts to take shape. I was 11 at the time and my sister was 13. We had been living in our new estate for half of a year when an incident occurred that would shape my life forever. Margaret was to attend a social for young women where she was to put on a piano performance. Margaret was excited about the opportunity and could not wait for the event. The morning 3 days before the social, however, Margaret had a riding accident. She was thrown from her horse and her left arm was fractured. Mother was devastated along with Margaret. I was equally saddened for them both. Margaret for the obvious reasons and Mother, because she wanted so badly to impress the social club that was presenting it. Mother wanted so much to become a member and Margaret's playing would have surely impressed the members. It was that night that my mother and Aunt Clara came to me with a suggestion. "Henry, my name from my father and grandfather, might we have a word with you?" my aunt asked me. "Yes?" I answered. "Son, my mother said I need the utmost favor upon you. This will sound quite preposterous at first, but please hear us out. I do not know how else to put this upon you, so I will just say it out. I need you to attend the social in your sister's place. You can play the piano better than your sister." "I will, Mother," I replied. "But will they allow a boy to attend it? I thought it was for girls and women only." My mother looked to my aunt and she looked back at my mother with pained looks on their faces. My mother replied, "It is only for women and girls." "I need you." The shock of what my mother was suggesting finally became clear to me. How could I? "I cannot do what you are going to ask. I would be humiliated. No one is going to find out, Henry. No one there has ever met Margaret or myself for that matter. Your aunt and I will prepare you for it. No one will ever notice." "What about my voice?" I answered. "I do not sound like a girl. This will never work." All the time I was arguing, I was also secretly excited. I had a secret that I hid from everyone. I have always fancied myself as a girl. Ever since I could remember, I had secretly been jealous of my sister. I wanted to be her. I would always dream about being a princess. I could not help myself and I always hated myself for it. I tried to forget about it, but the thoughts of myself as a woman would not stop. The feelings continued to manifest in myself. I was arguing to save face, but deep down the thought of going to the social as my sister was making me lightheaded with glee. My mother must have sensed something and thought I was really getting upset. "That is all right, son. I will not make you do something like this. It was foolish of us to ask this of you." I apologize. I could tell that my mother was heartbroken. I wanted to cry. I asked, "Could you really make me look like a girl?" They both turned to me. "I think we could. You are your sister's size, so fitting into her clothing should not be a problem," my mother told me, excitement coming back to her. You would really do this? Mother, I would not forgive myself if I was the cause of your misery. I will try, you think I can. Oh Henry, she came over and gave me a hug. I will let you buy whatever you want if you do this. Thank you, Mother, I answered as a tear came out me also. My mother and my aunt now got to talking as to how they were going to pull this off. My aunt would attend in my mother's place as my chaperone, since she had to attend to Margaret. I would not have to really say anything to anyone. My aunt would do all the talking. They did have me practice saying some lines, like "Thank you, madam," and I would be honored in as girly a voice as I could. I sounded better when I spoke softly, so they told me to talk that way. I was then told to get a bath. I did and was told to wrap a towel around me and come to my mother's room. I did, and my mother handed me a set of silk pantalettes of my sister's. I hurriedly slid them on, taking in their softness. It felt exquisite. My aunt, who had entered, handed my mother a chemise and she slid it over my head. It was so pretty. I was in secret ecstasy as the chemise fell to my calves. The embroidery on the hemline was quite heavenly. My aunt tied the drawstring around my neck. Now this next item will not be comfortable, but it is necessary, my mother told me as they put a corset around me. It was off-white. My aunt then got behind me and told me to take a deep breath. I did, and she tied the corset tight against me. It was hard to breathe, but she told me to finally breathe. It was still hard to, with the corset restricting me. Are you feeling all right? My mother asked. It is hard to breathe, but I will be fine, I told her. I was slowly starting to get better acquainted with it. Next came the petticoats. Since it was fall and cooler outside, they gave me 3 petticoats to put on. They were all white and felt divine resting on my now narrow waist. I could barely contain my delight wearing these wonderful clothes. My mother then put the hoop skirt around me. I then put on an absolutely beautiful white petticoat that had such pretty lace embroidery around the hem. Then my aunt told me to put a white shirt with lace collars and cuffs on. My mother then told me to hold each leg up while she put shoes on me. They were light blue in color. Then came a dress. It was a day dress of blue and white stripes. My mother slipped it over my head and pulled it down over the hoop skirt. My aunt buttoned up the buttons all the way to my neck, making sure the lace collar of the shirt was showing. I was then shown how to hold my skirts up so I could sit without making a spectacle of myself. I mastered that quite easily. They then put towels around my shoulders and put hair oils in my hair and combed it down with a part in the middle. They pined the back of my hair up into a roll and set it with a hairnet. Stand up and have a look, my mother said. I stood and walked to the mirror, taking smaller steps as girls do. I was amazed at what I looked like in the mirror. I looked like a girl. I wanted to shout with joy, but I kept it inside. I looked to my mother and aunt. I did have a question. What about? I said, pointing to my chest area. What about it? My mother asked. I do not have, Oh, do not worry about that. Most girls your age don't have much either. I was a little relieved about that. Now what? I asked. Now you get used to wearing a dress. Just walk like we showed you. Walk around the house. The servants have left for the day, so no one will see you. I did as they said. I walked around the house. As soon as I left their sight, I let out the biggest smile. I was floating, gliding around the house in this pretty outfit. My sister called to me from her bedroom and I walked in. She started laughing. You are not a boy at all. You are just a pretty little girl, she mocked at me. I acted like I was mad and stormed out of her room, to her laughter. The joke's on her. I loved that she called me pretty. I felt like a pretty princess. I wore the dress for the rest of the day and then undressed and went to bed. I got up and my mother dressed me as a girl again. She told me to talk like we practiced. I kept up the ruse all morning and then it was time to leave for the social. I was so nervous and excited. My mother gave me a big hug and told me I would do fine and to listen to my aunt. I told her I would as my aunt's carriage was brought to the front. Margaret was sulking beside my mother, wearing a splint for her broken arm. She was jealous of me. I curtsied to my mother and she clapped with joy. The carriage driver then opened the door and held out his hand for me. I took it as I lifted my skirts with my other hand and stepped into the carriage. My aunt sat across from me and we left, my heart beating fast. It was a pleasant ride that took 2 hours to get to. My aunt was giving me instructions and assuring me that we would leave as soon as we could. I just sat in silence for the most part, trying to calm my nervousness. We arrived in the early evening and were shown to our rooms. No one seemed to notice me for who I really was, to my relief. My aunt told me I was doing fine and that I needed to bathe before dinner. I did and we got myself dressed again, this time in a deep steel blue dress with black velvet flounces. The short sleeves had 3 flounces with heavy lace on the edges of each flounce. The skirt had 5 flounces that matched the sleeves. My hair she pinned up in full bandeaus, held by a comb with pearls. Now I really felt like a princess. I was gliding as we walked to the dining area. My heart was beating fast as we took our seats that were marked for Mary Gelding, my aunt, and Margaret Worthington, me. I sat down and we dined, thankfully no one addressed me to talk. I nodded mostly when addressed, my aunt telling them about me being very shy. I said a few words to one woman, and she did not seem to notice anything out of the ordinary. All in all, I had a wonderful evening. My aunt and I then retired to our room in the mansion. I had to wear one of my sister's nightgowns to keep up appearances just in case of an emergency. I did not mind as I went to sleep in a silky dream. The day of the social had arrived and I was very nervous. My aunt assured me that I was doing wonderful so far. I got ready for the event. My dress was a beautiful pink tarlatan gown with a double skirt. The upper skirt being looped up with large, black velvet ribbon bows, with the bottom skirt rounded. The sleeves barely go past the shoulder, being made into poofs of pink tarlatan. My hair was again pinned up into a tight bun. I was given matching bracelets and then my aunt produced a bottle. It was lavender-smelling perfume straight from Paris. It smelled heavenly as she applied some to me. She told me I looked like an angel. I felt like one too. We walked to the main ballroom where the social was being held. We took our seats and waited to be called. They called for Miss Margaret Worthington and I arose and went to the piano. I sat and began playing. I seemed to enter another place, where I forgot how I looked as I played. To say that I played great was an understatement. I finished to great applause, and I curtsied to the audience. I then took my seat with a happy smile, which my aunt gave back to me, congratulating me on my performance. After the social was over, my aunt and I went to the lady of the house to say our goodbyes. "You are leaving so soon? You both must stay for the dance," the Lady Olivette said. "We did not know there was a dance," my aunt said, looking nervous. "Oh yes, the young gentleman must meet such a fine young lady as Margaret," she said to me sweetly. "They will definitely make a fuss over you." I blushed and looked down, being very nervous over this predicament. My aunt did not know what to say. "I think we could stay for a little more." We do have to get back to Margaret's house and see how her older sister is getting along, my aunt told her. Of course, the dance is starting shortly, Lady Olivet said as the chairs were cleared and a pianist and a violinist came in and started playing. Then the men started to arrive. I was so nervous, clinging to my aunt for support. What do I do? I asked her. Just stand by me for a little while, then we will quietly take our leave. Don't worry, everything will be fine, she told me. I stood while the men filed in and then the dancing started. I was secretly envious of the girls dancing. I watched them glide across the dance floors with their men in hand. I was watching as a young man in his early 20s approached. He was in an army officer's uniform. How do you do, he said. I am Chester Hummerfeld, a lieutenant in the Army of the Potomac. Might I have the pleasure of your names? I was frozen in panic. My aunt answered him. I am Mary Gelding and this is my niece Margaret Worthington. Charmed, he said as he took my aunt's hand and gently kissed it. He then took my hand and kissed my gloved fingers. A shiver ran down my spine. What was I feeling? Was I excited that a man kissed my hand? I was. I blushed and looked down. Of the Ohio Worthingtons, he asked me. I looked to my aunt. She answered. Why, yes, she is. I served under your father. He was a brave man and a great leader. It saddened me when he died. My sincerest apologies. Thank you, I said as girlish as I had practiced. Might I have the pleasure of this dance? He held out his hand to me. I was stricken with fear. I looked again to my aunt and she bent over and whispered to me, you can dance. Just let him lead. It would be a great insult if you refused. She then stood back. I nervously took his hand and he led me to the floor. It was a waltz playing and he took my hand in his and put his other hand gently on my side. I put my hand on his back and we danced. I could not help but smile as we danced. Looking down and seeing myself in this beautiful gown, dancing with a man. I can never remember being happier. The dance was over and he bowed to me. I curtsied back to him. He took my hand and led me back to my aunt. You dance divinely, he told me. Thank you. As do you, I told him back. I do not mean to impose, but are you both just visiting? He asked. No, the Worthingtons have moved back here following the death of her father. They now reside at Gelding Manor. Wonderful, he said. Again, I do not mean to impose, but might I call on you again sometime when I return from the field? She would love that, my aunt said. Now, I hate to be rude, but it is getting late and we have to return home. Of course, forgive me, he said. Until we meet again. He kissed my hand as he left. I gave my aunt a stern look. Do not worry yourself. He will probably forget about you after dancing with some of these other ladies. Let us say our goodbyes and be off, she said to me. We went to Lady Olivet and told her we had to leave. She wished us safe journey and told my aunt to tell my mother that she would gladly be invited to join their group, with my aunt as well. I curtsied to her and we left to our carriage. I was relieved to be back in the safety of the carriage. I was also a little sad. I wish I could have danced some more. My adventure was almost at an end. You look a little sad, my aunt asked me. She had a sheepish smile on her face. I am fine, thank you, I said. You had fun doing this, did you not? She asked me. Yes, I did, I answered. Please do not tell my mother or Margaret. It was fun to pretend. No harm done, she answered. The drive home was pleasant. We arrived back at our house in the early evening. My mother came out. You look absolutely splendid, my mother said to me. Please, mother, I said with fake anger. My mother was pleased to hear how well it went and how she was invited to join the women's club. I was just going to go upstairs to change when my mother said to me, "One last thing, Henry. Please come to the parlor." I entered and my mother had gotten out my father's photograph camera. "Mother," I pleaded. "Hush, Henry. Just one picture for memory." "Oh, very well," I sighed. She had me sit in a chair and my aunt fixed up my hair. I sat and she took a picture. Then my aunt got behind the camera and took a picture of my mother and I together. I also had to take one of my aunt and I. I then got undressed. I felt a wave of depression flood over me as I laid in bed that evening. My boring life was back to normal. I cried myself to sleep. I lived the life of a normal young man for the next 8 years. I eventually buried my feeling for the like of a woman, thinking it best to move on from such frivolous activities. I took a job as a bookkeeper for a shipping merchant just for the experience. I wanted to live my own life. I rented an upstairs apartment in town. I tried to get on with my life. I was just adjusting to a life of simple boredom when the next event occurred in my life. My sister, Margaret, had come to visit me one afternoon at my place of work. "Hello, Henry. How are you today?" Margaret asked me upon her arrival. "I am very well, thank you," I answered. We proceeded to have a pleasant conversation when I invited her to my apartment whilst I changed into appropriate attire for dining. Margaret then asked of me, "I have something to show you." She sat beside me and showed me a photograph. It was the photograph of me dressed in Margaret's evening dress from the social I attended in her stead. All the waves of giddy emotions flooded back into me. How wonderful those days were! I smiled at the picture and hurriedly changed my expression. Margaret took notice. "I saw you smile just now, my brother," she said with a coy expression of her face. "You know, you never told me about that adventure. You must have had some fond memories. Do tell." I started to say and then I started crying. "Oh my, I am so sorry. I should not have done this. Forgive me." Margaret gave me a hug and let me cry for a few moments, then I gained my composure. "No, forgive me, Margaret, for not being honest with you. I should have told you long ago." I then told her the whole story of the social. My playing splendidly, my dance with the young soldier, everything. Then I told her the truth about myself. "Margaret, I did enjoy myself. I cannot help it. I really enjoyed being a girl that weekend. I looked and felt so special, so beautiful. I was in heaven. I do not know why I feel that way, but I do. Please do not tell anyone. I would be mortified. I would never betray your confidence, Henry. But I must ask, if you enjoyed it so much, why did you stop? You could dress in private and no one would find out. It is not what men do." I replied. "I would be considered fancy. I would not take the chance of discovery. What would happen to our family name?" "Really, Henry, you are being melodramatic," Margaret said, and that made me laugh. We both laughed then. "You are right, Margaret. I am being silly. But seriously, I really could not." We went to dinner at a local restaurant and while we talked, Margaret suddenly said, I have a wonderful idea. Do tell, I said. No, I cannot tell you here. Please come by the manor tomorrow. It is your day off. I have something to show you. I will be there then, I replied. I went home that evening feeling better than I had in a long time. It was good to finally tell someone my feelings. The next day had me at Gelding Manor. Margaret had inherited it from Mother, who passed away from influenza 2 years ago. Half of it was mine, but I let Margaret handle the estate. Her husband had recently died from a gunfight out west when he was on a surveying mission for the government, leaving my sister a childless widow. Margaret has a man who is courting her, Charles Billingsley, but he is out of town on business. I arrived and Margaret led me upstairs. We walked into the bedroom of Margaret's former lady-in-waiting, Elisa, who had recently married. I thought we could have fun, Margaret said as we entered. Elisa had many wonderful dresses. She was your size almost to the letter. Margaret, I told you I gave that up, I said rather unconvincingly. The thought of wearing dresses again was making my heart flutter rapidly. I can see the look on your face betraying your words, dear brother. Come now, you know you want to. Why are you doing this? I asked her. I want you to be happy. Please let me dress you. I had to smile. Very well, I said. All right. Go take a bath. I did, and she laid a pair of pantalettes out for me. I was ecstatic as I slipped the silk, lacy pantalette on. I then went into the room and was handed a chemise of soft silk with lace trimmings. It felt so good on my skin. It sent shivers down me slipping it on. Margaret was holding a corset, which she slipped over me. It was longer than the one I had worn before. Margaret said it was the style now. She tied it very tight, giving me a wonderful V-shape to my waist. She handed me 2 bags full of rice. What is that for? I asked. Put them here, she pointed to her breasts. I did, and it filled the area up of the corset on top, giving me the wonderful illusion of having breasts of my own. You have thought of everything, I told her, and she smiled. Now came the wonderful petticoats. It was summer, so I just wore one. I was handed the hoop next, but it was definitely different from the one I wore before. I inquired about it. It is called a bustle, Henry. It is the fashion now. The bustle created a large area in the rear and sides, but remained flat in the front. Next came another petticoat. This one was beautifully embroidered in lace. I felt incredible. Now the skirt. It was dark blue with asymmetrical pleating layers throughout. It gathered along the bustle in the back, flowing down to a long train. The bodice was boned, giving me even greater shape to my hips. The detailing was matching the skirt, with long sleeves that narrowed at the wrists. I was given matching gloves. Then, Margaret put my now long hair up into a fancy bun and held it with an ivory comb. A matching bonnet she tied around my head. My shoes were put on and I was ready to look. I glided over to the standing mirror and practically swooned. I was beautiful again. Margaret giggled with delight at my reaction. She walked over to me. How do you do, my lady? I am Margaret Billingsley. And you are, she said with humor in her voice. I am Isabella Worthington. How do you do? I answered in a feminine voice. I still could speak it, even after all these years. Very nice, Isabella, Margaret said. You have the voice down quite nicely. Thank you, I said in my feminine voice. Shall we? Margaret said as she led me from the bedroom to the sitting room. We sat, and I remembered to gather my skirts up as I sat, so the bustle would not ride up. Very good, again. You really are a woman, are you not? We both laughed at that one. We had tea and the servant girl did not even notice who I was, referring to me as Miss. I was in heaven chatting with my sister. I wonder whatever happened to that fine young officer who courted me. I asked out loud. Do you remember his name? I could inquire. Margaret asked me. It was Chester Hummerfeld. You remember, do you? Why, Isabella, I do believe you are smitten with him, are you not? Maybe I was, I answered, and we both laughed again. I felt so at ease dressed as I was and talking as I was. I did not want this day to end. We took a walk around the gardens, Margaret giving a parasol that matched my dress. It was so relaxing to walk around the garden. It was like I really noticed how beautiful the flowers were for the first time. After our walk, we had a light dinner, then it was getting on and I had to go back to my apartment. Margaret asked me to stay, but I had work to do at home. Well, let me call for the carriage, Margaret said. I should get dressed first, I said. Why? Is it not obvious? I laughed, pointing to my dress. Who is going to see you? Just take your clothes home. I shall give you a baggage to carry them. What if someone I know sees me? They will just see a pretty young woman. They will probably hold the door open for you. I would not worry if I were you. No one would be able to tell you are a man. Do you really think so? I asked. Of course. Now let me call the carriage. She went to the carriage men and then produced my clothing in a traveling bag. Goodbye, dear Isabella. Do come by again. I could always use more women friends. I will, sweet Margaret, I told her and gave her a hug goodbye. I let the carriage man help me into the carriage and away we went. My heart was beating rapidly, hoping that no one would see me. I arrived at my apartment building and I stepped out of the carriage. I went to the door and the doorman held it open for me, not noticing who I was. But then he talked to me. Excuse me, Mississippi. But who are you here to see? I was frozen with fear. I stammered for a second and said I am Henry Worthington's cousin Isabella. He gave me his keys and told me to wait for him here. He should not be long, I said as convincingly as I could. He looked at me and said, I can see the resemblance. But might I say you are a much prettier version? Thank you, I replied sweetly as he let me pass. I did it! I was floating as I ascended the stairs, only to have the woman who lived below me open her door as I was passing. That is a beautiful dress, my dear, Catherine said. Catherine DeLong was the widow of Custis DeLong, a general in the Union Army. Thank you, madam, I replied. My name is Catherine DeLong. And you are? Isabella Worthington, I replied. A relation of Henry? Yes, his cousin. Of course. She said, giving me a hard look. You and Henry must come to dinner tomorrow. We would love to, but Henry is out of town on business. I am staying at his residence for the next few days. Why did I say that? Well, you must come to dinner tomorrow then. I will not take no for an answer. Until 5 tomorrow then? Of course. I would be honored, I said and curtsied to her. How nice. What manners you have, young lady. I cannot wait for tomorrow. She gave me a hug and a kiss on the cheek and walked back into her apartment. What was I going to do now? I went back to the doorman. Could you be so kind as to get a message to my cousin Margaret Billingsley at Gelding Manor? Of course, Mississippi. What should it say? Tell her Isabella needs her assistance tomorrow morning as soon as she can arrive. I will get someone there tonight. Thank you, I said. It went to my room. I sat down in a chair, and my bustle pushed my dress up in the front. I hurriedly stood up and gathered my skirts and sat back down. What was I going to do? Could I really keep up the masquerade for a whole dinner with a stranger who knew Henry? I did not get much sleep that night. The next morning Margaret arrived early. I brought her inside. I thought I was meeting Isabella, she said with mock sincerity. No time for jests, I told her, then explained what happened last night. I waited for her to offer some advice. What is to talk about? Just go to the dinner. How can I? I will help you get ready. I will just go home and get an evening dress for you. I cannot keep this up. The pressure is getting to me. Henry, listen to me. All joking aside, you are a very passable woman. You can do this. Just relax and have fun with it. I will go home and bring back everything you will need. Now get a bath and I will be back in a few hours. Margaret left and I did as she said. I took a long bath to try to relax. Margaret came back around 2 in the afternoon with a few bags. She led me to my bedroom and told me to undress. She turned her back as I slipped on the pantalettes. These ones were even lacier than the others. Next came a lacy chemise and a silky petticoat. The corset from last night was tied to me even tighter than last night. My breathing was restricted, but I got quickly used to it. I put on the same bustle as last night and I put on another petticoat. Next came a beautiful black silk underskirt. It was trimmed with lace, beads, ruching, and flounces. My heart danced as I saw myself in it. The bodice was next. It was a breathtaking hunter green with lace around the edges of the short sleeves. It had a black lace overlay around the inner edges of the dress. It ended with a pretty bow of black and green at the breastline. My breast inserts were added in. The overskirt was then stepped into. It matched the green of the skirt with black lace layers at the hemline, ending with a train behind the bodice. Margaret gave me a choker make of Venetian lace with a woman's silhouette cameo to put around my neck. Hunter green gloves completed the outfit. Margaret had put my hair up into a tight bun and held it with a pearl comb. I looked amazing. I had to admit to myself, I was a pretty woman. I was very nervous, though, as the hour of 5 arrived and I had to go to dinner. Just relax, Isabella. You will do fine, she gave me a hug for comfort and I walked downstairs and knocked on the door. The butler opened the door. I told him I was Isabella Worthington to see Madame Catherine DeLong. He led me into the parlor where Catherine was seated. She rose and gave me kisses on the cheeks, which I gave back in kind. I will say Catherine is an attractive woman. In her mid-30s, dark-haired and very plump. I am so glad you could come, Isabella. Your dress is just lovely. Thank you, madam. Your dress is quite stunning too. Please, call me Catherine. Shall we adjourn to dinner? Catherine led the way and we dined on fine food and wine. We conversed on everything from the war to my family to Henry. Catherine gave me a quizzical look when we talked of Henry. It made me nervous, but she never let on like she knew. She then gave me a quick tour of her apartment, which was much nicer than mine. We then retired to her parlor. So, Isabella, Henry has never mentioned you before. I cannot understand why not. You are such a charming young lady. Well, Catherine, Henry is a shy young man and probably is too intimidated to chat with such a handsome woman as yourself, I said, which was the truth. Catherine, as I have stated before, is very beautiful. I see, Catherine said. So can I ask you something, Isabella? How long have you been dressing like this? Excuse me? I said, stammering. She knows? Come now, Henry. I can tell it is you. I know your face. I was so embarrassed. I hung my head, not knowing what to say. Don't worry about your little secret. It is safe with me. How did you know? I asked in my normal voice. Oh, do not worry. You are completely convincing as a woman. As I said, I know your face. I did not know what to say or do. I apologize for trying to deceive you. It was not my purpose to. I just did not know how to handle the situation. I will take my leave now, madam, I answered and got up to leave. Oh, please do stay. As I said, I am not judging you at all. As a matter of fact, this could work out nicely. What could, if I may ask? Please sit, Catherine asked of me, and I did. I knew it was you last night. I was astonished when I saw you dressed as a beautiful woman. I invited you to dinner for another reason than to just be friendly. How do I put this? You gave me an idea on a problem of mine. I have a proposal for you. Well, let me ask you, how do you like the job you have right now? That caught me quite off guard. It is not the best job in the world, but it suffices, I told her the truth. How would you like to make a lot more money? Money is not the reason why I work, madam. My family has money if I need it. Well, how would you like a job that is more rewarding and stimulating for someone like you? What do you mean? I asked. I find myself in need of a lady-in-waiting. I think Isabella would be perfect. I was shocked. How could I? I am not a lady. No one but me and your sister know that. Catherine seemed to have some sort of plan all worked out. Could I really do this? I do not know. Please think about it. You can be Isabella every day. I can help you become even more believable than now. It is what you want, is it not? Why do you not just find a girl to be your lady-in-waiting? I just thought that you wanted to be a woman. The way you dress and act so convincingly. I just thought that this arrangement could work for the both of us. I had to think about this. Could I at least think on this? Do you need an answer right now? Take all the time you need. I do not want to rush you. Thank you, Catherine. I will think about it. I will let you know as soon as I can. I said my goodbye and took my leave. I was still in shock as I went to bed that evening. Could I really do this? I awoke to my sister at my door. I let her in and she wanted to know everything that happened. I told her the whole story. Margaret sat back in shock. Are you going to do it? She asked me. Of course not, I answered. How could I? It is preposterous. Why, is it not what you really want? To live as a woman? I honestly do not know, I answered. To be honest, the thought of living as a woman sounds so appealing to me. I would love to do it, but what about the consequences? What if a man would ask to court me? How would I handle something like that? Tell them that you are committed to your lady and cannot, Margaret answered me. The more we talked, the less my apprehensions took hold, and the more I felt like I could do it. Be honest, do you really think I could? I asked her. Henry, I am being completely honest. You are completely believable as a woman. I think you should have been a woman. That is how I feel. I started to cry at that. My walls had completely fallen. I wanted this so badly now, there was no going back. I told her I was going to do it. Margaret cried with joy for me as well. I told her I was going to go down and let Catherine know now. She wished me luck and told me she would stay to hear what was next. I could see the excitement in her eyes for me as well. I went downstairs and knocked on Catherine's door. The butler answered and I told him I was there to see Madame DeLong. I sat in the parlor with her. I have made up my mind. I want to do it. I could hardly contain my delight. I am so glad. Catherine came over and gave me a hug. You are so going to love it here. I pamper my girls. I had to giggle at that. So when do you want me to start? Today, if you like? I need to get my affairs in order. I need to notify my job that I am leaving. I need to tell the landlord that I am moving. I can take care of the landlord. You go tell your boss now that you are moving and leaving. Then come back here. Leave your key with me. I will get movers to take your belongings to your family's manor. I need my lady now, Catherine said that with mock severity. Yes, my lady, I replied in my feminine voice. I curtsied. It must have looked funny in my man clothes. I do have to go to my apartment. My sister is waiting. Oh, good. I will accompany you. I want to talk to her. I followed Catherine out and up to my apartment. Margaret was waiting and I introduced her to Catherine. So nice to meet you, my dear, Catherine said to Margaret. Nice to meet you as well, Margaret replied. We talked of my accepting and we made preparations. Margaret, can you bring your former lady-in-waiting's clothes to my apartment? Catherine asked her. Isabella needs all the clothes she can get. Of course, I will leave immediately. I will make the arrangements with my people to move Henry's things back to my estate. Do not worry about that, Catherine. You have your hands full with my little sister. Margaret gave me a big smile and I returned it. Good, so I will await your return, Isabella. Go now to your old boss. Hurry back, we have a great many things ahead. As you say, I said and left. I went to my boss's house and gave him my notice. He was not very happy, but I did not care at this point. I practically ran back to Catherine's apartment. I knocked and Catherine met me at the door. She gave her butler the rest of the day off so I could become Isabella without anyone else seeing. Here is a key to the apartment. I will explain your duties while we await your clothing. Catherine then laid out that I was to basically serve as her confidant. I would help her get dressed when she needed it, as she would help me in the same capacity. She really did not expect too much out of her girls other than that. I was to help with whatever she needed. The cook handled the meals, the butler and made the chores. I would be there as her confidant and friend. I could not believe my luck. I was going to be a woman from now on. My clothing arrived in the moving carriage. There were 5 boxes and 6 bags of things. All mine. We hung up all my clothing and put the rest in dressers in my new bedroom. We shall dine out this evening, Isabella. Let us get you dressed now. After I took a bath, I put on a set of silk pantalettes. Then came the rest of the undergarments: chemise, petticoats, corset, bustle, and shoes. The skirt was peach-colored with 3 layers of white lace trim. All 3 layers were accented with white bows on the sides. It has an attached overskirt that is bunched up in the back along the bustle, flowing down into a beautiful train. The bodice is boned and matches the skirt in color and lace. The sleeves come to below the elbow and are also finished with silk pleating over a wide gathered lace and finished with the pearled net and Venice laces. The waist of the bodice comes to a long V at both the front and back and is again finished with the pearled net and Venice laces. It is so beautiful. You look divine, Isabella, Catherine said with approval. My hair had been gathered in a tight bun. A matching bonnet was tied to my head. We then went to her room and I helped her get dressed. It was embarrassing at first, but Catherine put me at ease and told me that I better get used to seeing her like this. We put on our gloves and had a carriage take us to a restaurant. We were seated and took our orders. We chatted about the weather and such things while we waited for our food. An older couple approached our table. Captain Andrews, Melina. How are you? Catherine said. Captain Andrews took Catherine's hand and kissed it. We are doing fine, Catherine. And you? Melinda said. Fine. Thank you. Let me introduce Miss Isabella Worthington. My new lady-in-waiting. Charmed, Captain Andrews said as he took my hand and kissed it. A pleasure to meet you both, I said. What a charming young lady you have, Catherine, Melinda told Catherine. I thanked her. They made small talk for a moment, then took their table. Our food arrived and we ate then left with no more interruptions. We arrived back at our apartment and I helped Catherine into a nightgown. I then retired to my room and put on a cream-colored nightgown and went to sleep, happier than I had ever been. The next 2 years I spent in feminine bliss. Being the lady-in-waiting to Catherine DeLong certainly has advantages. My wardrobe expanded wondrously. I now owned many day and evening dresses, so many that I never had to wear the same one more than once a week. I studied the etiquette and mannerisms of being a woman of culture and taste. Catherine and my sister Margaret Billingsley were both wonderful tutors and have helped me become Isabella Worthington. I have not worn male attire or attempted to be masculine for over 2 years, and I do not miss it one bit. My daily life consists of helping Catherine with whatever duties she requires of me and learning the finer point of being the fairer sex. My hair has now grown to past my shoulders, and I usually wear it pined up in ringlet. My life could not be more complete, at least I had thought so. One afternoon in my 2nd year of service to Catherine, my life took another turn. Catherine and I were enjoying the warm spring weather by taking a walk around town. I was wearing a light blue day dress, matching bonnet and parasol. My sister Margaret wrote earlier and said she would join us for an afternoon tea at the Ellington Inn. We walked to the inn and Margaret was already there. After we exchanged our greeting, Margaret informed me of some interesting news. Isabella, do you remember a man by the name of Chester Hummerfeld? I almost choked on my tea. Of course I do. I answered. My voice is now completely feminine. I could not even talk like a man again if I tried. But anyhow, how could I forget the man who asked me to my first waltz as a woman? He is back in the area. He is divorced and living back at his family's estate. My husband and I met him at a friend of my husband's house last night when we dined there. And? I asked in an excited voice. Why was I so excited? I do not fancy men. He inquired about you. Margaret said. Catherine clapped with delight. Why are you two so excited? I asked. We are happy for you because you are happy, Catherine said. You did tell me how wonderful that dance was with him. You have told me on more than one occasion. I blushed with embarrassment. They both giggled, thinking that I must fancy him. I do not fancy him, I said. How could I? With me being what I am. What your art is, a young lady. I just assumed you fancied men. I am sorry for saying it, Margaret said. Isabella, you have never mentioned to me that you did not fancy men. I just assumed. I apologize also. I felt ashamed for making them apologize. I had to clear it up immediately. No, you both do not need to apologize. I need to apologize. I honestly do fancy men. I was just embarrassed because I do. You both must really think poorly of me. Of course we do not, Margaret told me. It is only natural for a woman to fancy a man. Catherine voiced her agreement. The question is still out there, dear sister. Do you fancy him? I fancy what he was. I still picture him looking handsome in his officer's uniform. I always had a secret fantasy that I was his wife. Of course that can never be. Catherine came over and gave me a hug. I wanted to cry, but I held back. Margaret sat with a quiet smile on her face. What is it? I asked her. Well, my husband was talking to some of the other gentlemen about Master Hummerfeld. The rumor is that Master Hummerfeld fancies the company of other men. The story about him was that he divorced his wife because he had a male lover. He hides those feelings by falsely pursuing women. How scandalous, Catherine said. But think on it. He inquires about Isabella. Isabella is, well, she is a special woman. Chester should like what she is, Margaret said. I was shocked that Margaret had thought of all of this. Do you really think it might happen? Like you said? What if he reveals to everyone what I am? I would be humiliated beyond words. Let us just see how it plays out. I invited him to dinner this evening. Catherine and you must attend. I told him Isabella would be there. Oh, course we will, Catherine said. I am not sure on this, I said, becoming nervous. As interested as I might be in Chester, I would gladly give him up to remain a woman. My secret is more important than a man, however handsome he may be. Isabella, you have nothing to fear from a simple dinner. You are not going to his bed the first time you meet him. It will be a good way to find out more about him. Dinner is at 6. Now I must be off to oversee the preparations. Good day to you both. I will see you tonight, Margaret said as she left. Catherine and I left as well, walking home to get ready. The dress I wore was pink and white. The overskirt was white and pink striped with lace edgings. A bow of pink rested on top of the bustle area. The underskirt was pink with 6 layers of ruffles along the hemline. The bodice was ruffled pink. It was off the shoulders with a square neckline, all edged in white lace. I wore my hair pinned up in ringlets held with a pink rose pin. My gloves were white. I wore a necklace of pearls with pearl earrings. We arrived at Gelding Manor ahead of most of the other guests. My sister greeted us in her sitting room along with her husband, Charles. Charles knew of me but never treated me other than Margaret's sister. Charles kissed both Catherine and my hands. My Charles, I may have to steal you away from my sister. I said playfully. You could never take me away from my love. He said back to me, causing Margaret to sigh. But I might be willing to sneak out back. Margaret playfully slapped him on the arm and we all laughed. Margaret commented on my dress. You dress to impress someone, I think. She told me. I blushed. We all went to the dining hall and greeted the guests as they arrived. My nervousness was growing until he walked in. Chester Hummerfeld was now in his late 30s, but he was still handsome. Tall and regal-looking, with dark hair and mustache. My heart was beating fast as I saw him. Chester came up and greeted my sister and Charles. Margaret introduced us. This is Catherine DeLong. And this is Isabella. How could I forget? Chester said to me and took my hand and kissed it. You are even more beautiful now than you were when last we met. I felt faint and short of breath. Thank you, sir. I said and curtsied to him. We continued to greet guests until dinner was called. Chester immediately came to me. Might I have the pleasure of your company? He held out his arm to me. I smiled at him and put my arm through his. We walked together to the table, where he held out a chair for me. I thanked him and took my seat. He sat next to me and we ate. Chester and I talked about our lives since we last met. I told him that I was homeschooled and then went into Catherine's service. Not much to tell, is it? I asked him. There need not be more. How come you never married? Surely a woman as beautiful as you should have had many suitors? Chester asked. There were a few, but I just never fell in love. I told him. He then told me his story. He stayed in the military for a few years and then his service was up and he moved west. He tried his hand at surveying and cattle ranching, but his heart belonged back east. Where exactly back east? I asked him playfully. Right in this town. He said back, looking deeply into my eyes. Again, I wanted to swoon. Catherine, who was sitting next to me on the other side, asked him, Were you not ever married? Well, yes I was. It did not last, though. We were not compatible. It was more a marriage of convenience. I married my boss's daughter to further my career. Very bad idea. I will never marry again for anything but love. He then smiled at me again. My heart wanted to leap out of my chest. The rest of the dinner went well enough. The men then retired to a smoking room and the ladies to the sitting room. More idle gossip and light conversation followed. I stood behind Catherine while they talked. It was after a while that I saw Chester in the next room and he motioned for me. I quietly walked out after excusing myself. Catherine saw him and gave me a smile and encouragement. I walked to the other room. I am taking my leave and wanted to say goodbye to you, Isabella. I had a wonderful time this evening. I was hoping that I might call on you again. I am having lunch in town tomorrow and was hoping for your company. Chester said to me, looking deep into my eyes. I was lost in emotion. I would love to, as long as my lady has no need of me. I answered. I will send a messenger tomorrow to await your reply. Good night, my lady. He kissed my hand and that sent shivers down my back. I went back to the room after Chester left and Catherine was leaving along with the rest. We said our goodbyes and I told her and Margaret about what Chester said. Of course you can go. Catherine said. Thank you. I said excitedly. I really did fancy him. Catherine and Margaret both gave me a hug. Catherine and I left for home. We talked about Chester on the ride. I do believe the stories about him are correct. Did you notice the way he evaded any questions about his ex-wife and not having any children? He became quite embarrassed over the subject. Isabella, tread lightly at first with him. Do not lead him on too quickly until we can find out for sure. I will do as you ask. I hope he is what we think. I feel myself most. Take it slowly, Isabella. It will be for the best. If he is what we think, right now he thinks you are a real woman. He might be using you for a false front. Be sure of his real feelings for you before you fall too far. I will, thank you, Catherine. We arrived home shortly after that and retired for the night. The next day came and I got ready for my luncheon. My dress was blue with gray stripes. The skirt has 3 horizontal sections in white lace with black lace overlay. The bodice in the same colors with vertical lace overlay. The black bonnet had a large black ribbon to tie. Black gloves and parasol to complete. I took a carriage to the restaurant where Chester was to meet me. He was already there and walked me to my seat after kissing my hand. We had a delightful conversation. After lunch, we decided to take a walk around the park, it being such a lovely day. We walked arm in arm, not really talking. We got to a bench and he offered his coat for me to sit on. I thanked him and we sat. After a short while of sitting, he turned to me. Isabella, I can honestly say I have never been more enchanted by anyone in my life. You are the most charming, intelligent and beautiful woman I have ever had the pleasure on knowing. My breathing had become faster as he spoke those words. I had to calm myself and remember what Catherine had said last night. It was hard, though, when I looked into his handsome face. I could not help myself. Chester, I feel the same feelings as you do. I think you are the most handsome, charming man I have ever met. I just could not hold my feelings in. It was in that moment that I realized that I was in love with this man. I always had been. I knew I should not be yet, but my feelings were so intense in that moment. He took both my hands in his. We sat there for a long time just looking into each other's eyes. It is getting on to evening, and I must see you safely home, Chester said and got up, offering his hand to me. I took it and we walked back to the restaurant, where Chester arranged for a ride home. Chester rode with me, holding my hand the entire time. He told me he wanted to see me exclusively. I agreed. We arrived back at my home and he walked me to the door. Chester gently took my hand and kissed it deeply and said his goodbye. I wanted to faint, but composed myself as I watched him drive away. Catherine wanted to know all about it and I told her everything. Isabella, my dear, you may have gone too fast. What were you thinking? Do you not remember our conversation last evening? I could not help myself, Catherine. I love him. I cannot believe I just said that, but it was true. I did love him. Oh dear. Catherine said and held me while I was overcome with emotion and started crying. It will be fine, dear. We will think of something. I composed myself and had a light dinner and went to bed. I laid in bed and thought of the day's events. I came to a realization. Even though he may be putting on a false front, I could not. I had to tell him the truth. My conscience would not take the deceit any longer. I fell into a fitful sleep. The next morning I sat with Catherine after breakfast helping her knit some tattered clothing. Catherine always liked to knit, it helped her think. We did not speak for the longest time, me building up the courage to tell her. I finally had to speak. Catherine, I have been thinking of all that happened yesterday. I cannot let it go any farther. I have to tell him the truth. Are you sure about this, Isabella? Think of the consequences to yourself and your family if it gets out what you are. But what am I to do? I cannot lie to him. I love him. I really do. I suppose you have to do what is right. Let us converse with your sister first and see what she feels. I agreed and we rode to her estate. We arrived and were led to the parlor where Margaret was reading with her ladies. She dismissed them and we sat and I told her everything that happened. I think you should tell him, Margaret said after we told her everything. Really, you do? I said. What about if he gets upset and tells people? I do not think you will have to worry about that. My husband found out that in truth, he had an affair with a junior officer of his. Chester's wife found out and that is why she divorced him. That is fine to know, but how does that help me? I said. You can use that as hostage against your secret. Catherine added. I am glad to hear this. Your secret should be safe. And who knows? Maybe he will love you all the same? I certainly hope so. I said with relief. He is to call on me tomorrow evening. I will tell him then. After a short visit, we went home. I was just preparing to change into an evening dress when there was a knock on the door. The butler answered and announced that Chester Hummerfeld to see me. I walked to the parlor and there he was. He came over to me and kissed my hand. Sweet Isabella, I just had to see you. I have to talk to you, in private if we can. Of course, I said and let him into the parlor. Please tell me what you need. Isabella, I have to come out with all of my story. I will not hide anything from you. I divorced my wife because I had an affair. I sat with a startled look on my face, even though I knew. He continued. That is not all of the story. This will hurt you and it will shame me, but I have to tell you the truth. I had an affair with one of my officers. A male officer. I sat with no emotion, but it was hard. The hurt on his face wanted me to comfort him. My heart ached for his pain. I cannot lie to you. I have sexual desires for men. I have so tried to stop them, but I cannot. That is why we must not see each other again. I will not humiliate you. You are too precious to me. I have never felt this way about a woman before, but I know I cannot stop myself from acting on my impulses. I am truly sorry. I sat there for a minute then said, I have something to tell you too. It is hard for me to say, but I will follow your lead and just say it. I am not really a woman. I am a man. Chester sat there for a moment and then chuckled. Do not jest with me. You are the epitome of woman. I have never met someone more graceful, delicate, and feminine as you. It took me a moment to bring back my male voice, but I did. I am really a man. Chester jumped up. He looked at me startled. Why? How? Please sit. Let me explain. I said as I instantly reverted back to my normal, female voice. I told him all about how I always felt like a girl. I told him about how I ended up at the social those years ago. I told him about my sister helping me and how Catherine came to know. I told him how this, as he saw me, was the real me. Chester, I am so sorry that I hurt you. I never meant to deceive you, but I could not help myself. I fell in love with you. Chester sat for a few moments in silence, then he turned to me. Isabella, I love you too. This all is very strange, but it also is for the best, is it not? I can devote myself to you entirely now. You have everything I need. You are the perfect woman. Oh, Chester, you are the perfect man for me. I love you. I love you, dear Isabella. Chester then took my face in his hands and kissed me. I returned the kiss, putting my arms around his neck. We held the kiss for the longest time. Thank God for my petticoats. They hid my private member perfectly. After we let go the kiss, he turned to me. Can you tell me who else knows? I told him my sister's husband is the only other one beside Catherine and my sister. Good. He said no one else needs to know. It will be our wonderful little secret. This will work out so well. We can be married and no one will be wiser. Oh yes, my love. I said back to him. I have dreamed of being your wife for years now. You will be my wife, my beautiful wife. I will be your adoring husband and I will love you forever. And I will love you forever. I said, and we kissed again. Chester then said he must leave for now and wished me good night. I watched him go and turned to see Catherine watching me. I am sorry I overheard. I am so happy for you, she said and gave me a long hug. I cried with joy and she cried with me. We sat and talked about what was next. Catherine sent a message to my sister telling her what happened. An hour later my sister arrived and gave me a big hug. We all cried some more. I am so happy for you, sister. I know you are both going to be so happy. I know so too. I still cannot believe how everything turned out. I am going to be a wife. I laughed with joy. Margaret, of course you are going to be my honor maid. I better be, after all, you were mine. Margaret said. We all giggled and talked for hours about my dream wedding. Maybe we are rushing into this too soon. I said. He has not officially proposed to me yet. I do not think you will have to worry about that. The way he left, I would not be surprised if he is not buying your ring right now, said Catherine. I squealed with delight. I hope it is one with diamonds and pearls, like the Paris fashion magazines show. They are so beautiful. You do not have to worry about money with him. He is very well off. You have gotten yourself quite a man, Isabella, Catherine said. I know I have, and he is all mine, I said, and we all giggled. Margaret left shortly after that, it being late and all. I changed into a nightgown and went to bed pleasantly exhausted. My future was looking absolutely perfect. It took my Chester 1 week to propose to me. We were having a picnic luncheon at the local park and it was after we ate Chester took my hand in his. My dearest Isabella, you have touched my heart like no other. I have never met such a perfect, beautiful, happy, dear, sweet woman such as yourself. My heart belongs to you and will to no other for as long as I live. Isabella, will you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Chester then got on one knee and held out the most beautiful ring I have ever laid my eyes on. It has a beautiful white pearl in the center, with small diamonds surrounding it. Of course I will, my dear Chester, I replied, then I started crying with joy. My love, you have made me the most happy woman in the world. I love you so much." We kissed then, passionately. More passionately than was proper for outdoors, but I did not care at the moment. I held on to the kiss for what seemed a goodly time, savoring the moment. "I love you so much, my Isabella," Chester replied. "Pray, let us make this engagement a short one. I wish to be your husband more than anything in this world. I shall make the arrangements as soon as can be possible, my love," I said back to him. "Then let us be off now. I shall take you home." We left in our carriage to return to my apartment that I lived in with my lady, Catherine DeLong. When we arrived, Chester led me to the door, kissing me goodbye and left. I rushed in to show Catherine the ring. "Oh my goodness, what a beautiful ring." "Congratulations, Isabella," Catherine said to me and gave me a big hug. We cried together over my bliss. I told her exactly how my Chester proposed to me. How romantic! Ah, to be young and in love. "It is wonderful, is it not?" she asked me. "I remember when my husband proposed to me. So similar to you, my dear." "Oh, Catherine," I said, "you are still young and beautiful. I am positive a good man will take your hand soon. You are too good of a woman to be a widow forever." "You are sweet to say that, dear girl," Catherine said with a smile on her face. We then talked of wedding plans. I wanted a large wedding at my family's estate. I knew my sister Margaret would want one as well. I sent a message to her telling her of my proposal. She sent one back saying to come to Gelding Manor in the evening tomorrow for preparations to begin. The next evening had me in one of my best evening dresses, a white one with rose adornments on each row of the outer skirt. The roses also adorned the shoulders of my bodice. My hair was up in a ring of curls on top of my head. I wore a golden heart necklace that my Chester bought me, with matching earrings. When Catherine and I arrived, it was to a party. Everyone I knew was there. My dear Chester met us at the carriage, taking my arm and leading me to the party. I had so much fun that evening, every man wanting to dance with me. My sister and I discussed the wedding plans with Catherine when the dancing was over. My nephew was to be my ring bearer and Chester's niece would be the flower girl. Margaret was to be my maid and Chester's cousin William would be his man. Chester's father would walk me down the aisle. My head was giddy with details and planning. I wanted to discuss my dress, but Margaret said she would take care of that. She told me she had a surprise for that and I would love it. I trusted her and thanked her for the party. Chester and I walked slowly to my carriage after the night's festivities. "Soon you will Mrs. Isabella Hummerfeld. How does that sound to you, my love?" Chester asked me. "It sounds divine, my love," I told him back. I could not ask for a more perfect name or a more perfect husband. Chester then kissed my hand. "I will see you in 2 weeks, my dear Isabella. I shall return from my trip to Boston more in love with you than as I leave. I will miss you dearly, my love." I returned to him, kissing him with vigor. "Until then, farewell." The next 2 weeks I kept busy with wedding planning. Chester and I set the date of May 22nd as our wedding day, which left only 2 months from now to make all the arrangements. Catherine, Margaret, and I were constantly meeting with wedding planners. Catherine and I stayed at Gelding Manor until the wedding to avoid any complications. Most of my belongings were moved to my new home at Hummerfeld Manor. Only some clothing accompanied me to Gelding. Catherine had made arrangements for her second cousin's niece to be her new lady-in-waiting. Her name was Angela. It brought my heart relief that Catherine found someone so quickly. It was one less item to worry about leading up to my big day. One night I was sitting in the parlor alone and I was thinking about all that had happened to me and was going to happen. Catherine walked in. "You look like something is troubling you, Isabella? Can I help?" "I have been thinking," I answered. "What if something terrible happens? What if someone finds about me? What would happen to Chester? I do not think I can do this." "Oh dear," Catherine said. "Sit," she told me, and I obeyed. "Do not worry. You have been very careful so far. You have lived over 3 years now as Isabella, and no one is the wiser. You are the picture of feminine grace and beauty. No one will ever find out that you do not want to. I am so worried about it, though. Think of the disgrace that would befall Chester." I could not bear to be the cause of it, I then stated. "You are just getting cold feet, my dear. Do not worry yourself so. Chester and yourself will take care not to have anything happen. Be happy. Your big day is almost upon us. You will soon be a married woman." I could not help but to be happy. Catherine always has a way of putting me at ease. "You will visit often, will you not?" I said. "Your companionship and advice will always be welcome. I would miss you dearly. I will visit as often as I can. But you will be married, and your utmost attention will be to your husband. Do not worry, you will do fine. I would not allow you to go through with this if I did not think you were ready." Catherine then came over and gave me a big hug, and that made me feel much better. The night before the wedding had me at dinner with my sister, Catherine, Angela, and a few of my other friends. The men were having a bachelor dinner for Chester. All the arrangements had been readied, all but one. "Margaret, where is my dress?" I asked her. "Do not worry, it is a surprise," Margaret told me. "It is prepared and ready. The dressmaker knows your size and measurements. It will look beautiful. I know you will love it." "I do hope so, dear sister," I replied. We then had a lovely dinner and I retired exhausted. The day had finally arrived. I was a mess of emotions, mostly worry. After breakfast, I was in my bedroom waiting for my sister to arrive with the dress. When she finally did, she helped me get ready. The white pantalettes were first, with lace at the bottoms. Then a beautiful petticoat of cream-colored silk with Venetian lace at the hem. My corset was cream white with lace edgings. My bustle came next, followed by another creamy petticoat. "Now close your eyes," Margaret told me. I did, and she wheeled the dress in on a mannequin. "Now look." "Oh my!" I gasped. "Is that?" "Yes, it is Mother's. I had it altered to fit the style of today. It is so perfect," I said and started to cry. It had one skirt of cream-colored silk that came down to a long train. The only adornment was a row of Venetian lace that was adorned with pearls. The bodice was adorned with the same lace around the neckline, but it had 3 layers of adornment at the cuffs. The bottom 2 layers were of beautiful taffeta. The 3rd layer was lace and pearls, with a satin bow on top. I could not contain my joy. "Come now, Isabella. You must not make your eyes puffy," Margaret said. I stopped crying and let her dress me. I now felt like the princess I always dreamed of being. Margaret then prepared my hair in beautiful ringlets. I adorned myself with pearl earrings and a white choker necklace. I gazed at myself in the mirror and wanted to cry again, but held my emotions. Catherine came in and cried at my dress. She gave me a big hug, as did Margaret. They both left to take their places. I was nervous and giddy at the same time. A knock on the door brought me out of my giddy stupor. "It is time, my lady," Chester's father, Simon, said from behind the door. I walked out of the room. "You are a lovely sight to behold, young lady," he said as he took my hand and kissed it. "Thank you." "You are too kind," I said as I took his arm. He led me to the chapel on the estate grounds. I was a nervous wreck by this point. Simon could tell. "Do not be nervous. You are doing fine," he told me, but I was still full of nerves. The music started and we started down the aisle. I found myself as if in a dream, unaware of all the people around me. I only had my eyes on Chester. He looked dashing in his fine coat. It put me at ease to see him there with a large smile on his face. He held out his hand to me as I arrived at the altar and I took it. The ceremony was quite exquisite but not very out of the ordinary. We exchanged our vows. When Chester said he would cherish and love me for the rest of his life, I nearly swooned. I returned my vows to him and he put the ring on my finger. The minister now pronounced us man and wife. Chester pulled back my veil and kissed me. "I love you," I told him. "And I love you," he told me back. "I now pronounce you Mr. and Mrs. Chester Hummerfeld," the minister said to everyone's applause. Chester led me down the aisle. Catherine was crying for me. I started to cry. We went out and greeted everyone while they passed us. I hugged Catherine so tight. "Thank you so much for everything, Catherine. You are my very best friend," I told her with tears. "Congratulations, Isabella. I know you will be so happy," she answered. Margaret came over and gave me a hug. "My dear sister, I am so happy for you," Margaret said to me. She then turned to Chester. "Do behave on your honeymoon," I blushed and Chester coughed. We all laughed. When that was over, the carriage came for us. I turned and got ready to toss the bouquet. All the single women gathered around and I tossed it. Catherine caught it. "You will be next now," I said to her. She just laughed. Chester and I then said our goodbyes and entered our carriage. We were off to Warm Springs in the morning, but for now it was to my new home. We kissed all the way there and he carried me up the stairs and to our room. Needless to say, it was quite a new experience for me what happened next. A proper lady does not expound on what happens in one's bedroom with her husband. I will just say it was the most wonderful night of my life. Epilogue: 1 year later, Chester and I are so happy. We have adopted a little girl from the orphanage. Her mother died in childbirth and without a father around. I named her Catherine Margaret Hummerfeld. We plan on adopting a son in the near future. I love being a mother. My sister says I am a natural at it. I could not agree more. How wonderful my life has turned out.